Hey, Game Changers, Barry McGee here, host and founder of the Comeback Game podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dan Peterson of Northwood Green and co-founder of the High Performance brand. A long life creative, he was educated in an alternative way, which I'm pretty keen to deep dive down into. Progressed through your opportunistic career, both in senior roles of obviously Australia and London. 5 years ago, decided that you guys really wanted a better quality life to raise your young family. Moved to the mountains and started your own studio with your partner, Jacqui Porter, which has brought you to today. Dan, mate, how you doing?
Barry, I'm excellent. Thank you, mate. And super grateful to be here. So looking forward to chatting.
Mate, I'm pretty pumped to have a chat to you today. I think one of the most enjoyable things out of my week, outside of my team meetings and connecting with our clients, is definitely the podcast interviews, because it gives me a chance to kind of ask the questions that I want to ask. But also it gives me a chance to dive into somebody else's world from a different perspective. And so I'm pretty keen to dive into your world. Before we do, though, for the people out there who might not know you today, who are watching or listening to this, wherever they are, tell us a little bit about you and what it is you do.
Sure. So I run a small brand agency. So we do brand design, brand identity, brand expression for lots of different businesses. My background's in media and publishing. So we when we started our studio, we noticed a real need for more of an editorial approach to brand, which means storytelling, a lot more audience focus. So we sort of set up with that in mind, and we weren't quite ready for the reaction to that. There's a lot of it really tapped into the needs of a lot of businesses today. Yeah. So our practice really today is about finding the bigger game that our clients' businesses are playing and finding a way of conveying that emotionally. Yeah. So a lot of our practice is around a research process that then comes out in their brand. We call it brand character rather than brand identity, or it's not just as simple as logos. It's really just how you show up in the lives of your audience.
Yeah. How important, it's a great topic. Like, how important do you believe that brand is in the 21st century? And I suppose, how important do you feel it is having a business brand versus having a personal brand? So there's kind of two questions there. Like, how important do you feel that having a brand is in the 21st century? Obviously, social media has made it incredibly easy for us to know everything about everyone all the time.
Yep.
How important do you think that is?
To me, it's everything, right? So we split our approach down to two categories. So there's brand building and there's activation. And if you don't get that mix right, they really undermine each other. So brand building is a slower burn. It's about building mental equity in the minds of your audience. Yeah. And the activation is your marketing and your sales and your go-to-market tactics, right? But all of those, all the activation functions, which a lot of people just put into a lot of focus on, really falls into marketing these days, and they lose potency if they don't have the foundation of the brand built underneath them. So it's especially relevant in what we call the attention economy these days, because attention and focus is just such a valuable resource. Yeah. We're all walking around with glowing rectangles, constantly receiving algorithmed information from our sphere of influence. And if you don't have a place in the minds and the hearts of your audience, when you come to a transaction or come to an actual pitch or any kind of that activation stage, you haven't emotionally primed them to care about what you're saying or what you're bringing. So to me, it's absolutely crucial. Brand versus personal brand, there's not a lot of difference these days, and it crosses into a lot of that into the personal development space, because if you're not ready to walk the walk as a personal brand, no agency, no creative concept can make you do it. So we often have that with execs or with leadership teams who say, we need to develop your personal brand. And if they're not ready to do it or they're not comfortable doing it, they really fall behind these days, because you really need, like you say, you need to have a presence. So both of those things are crucial. Personal brand and brand are the same thing these days.
Yeah. I know for myself, I've certainly seen the last 10 or 15 years, business has changed. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have the ability we have now to market online, to attract leads for the cost that we were able to using the different social medias. And equally too, you could very much hide to some degree, or large companies could hide behind brand.
Yeah.
They could hide behind a logo or their set of colors. And, many people could get away too with inauthentically selling their services. And I've certainly noticed a couple of things shift. Number one is that with the boom of social media, it's meant that everyone's got the ability to be in each other's back pockets, right, all the time,
Yep.
throughout every experience they're having of life. Which means that if you're not showing up authentically, and honestly and openly, your clients, your customers are going to be able to tell. And I think secondly, I think as a human existence, consciously we've grown. And so where 10 or 15 years ago, people could get away with being distrustful and it would kind of wear off. This day and age, like, people's BS radar is off the show. Like you cannot get away with being distrustful anymore, or selling someone something you don't believe in, because people are just so aware of it. They're so alert to that incongruency between what's coming out of their mouth consciously and what they're projecting unconsciously. And you look at the NLP model of communication, they say that the 7 or 8% of all communication is spoken word. A large part of that is then tonality, and the rest is physiology. And I think that, part of physiology is this energetic communication that's happening all the time between human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of that authenticity, what happens is, I think if you are just trying to figure out what the other person needs to hear, you lose yourself. And we find that with global organizations, that they're really lacking, some of them, they lack a language to explain their purpose. And that influences all kinds of things, not just consumer interactions, but interactions with talent attraction and their HR functions. And they have trouble building cultures because people are just there as an employee rather than someone that's really bought into a vision.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that gets exposed, like you say, when people aren't really, when their heart's not really in it.
Yeah. I'd love to know your take. Like, one company that's fascinating is Apple. I put a post into our members group the other day. It was a video around brands, and it showed over the last 10 years the market share and the following and the domination of different brands. And you could see there that Coca-Cola for years was dominating, right? Number one spot.
Oh, I've seen that. It moves along, right?
Yeah, consistent growth.
Yeah.
And then it's like all of a sudden you see come out of nowhere Apple, and they just absolutely dominate. Like, it's like they once they get this momentum up, the thing just grows exponentially. And that's fascinating because, Steve Jobs is not even here anymore, right? Steve Jobs is not around, yet what has been created within Apple and the vision he's had is dominating the marketplace, to the point that they have an upcoming release of an iPhone, and they have people waiting in the line. Shop even opens up to get the latest iPhone. Yeah.
So a lot of Apple nowadays is about, the myth of Steve Jobs is very much still around. And also how disruptive he was when it first started is really interesting from a brand perspective, as a student of that. But Apple these days, maybe it's petered off, it's debatable, I suppose, but they tapped into a couple of key concepts with brand, and that is status. So people elevated their status within their group, within their tribe, by purchasing Apple and being a convert of that. And people, they turned their early adopters into real advocates for their brand. So it became something much bigger than just my phone does this. It's I am someone who is smart enough to see that Apple is the future.
The Apple phone doesn't even do too much without the apps.
No,
that's the funny thing about it.
That's the thing. Yeah.
You go and buy an Android or something, and a lot of them are pre-loaded up with everything you need. You go and buy an Apple, and you got to download all the apps to make the thing work.
Yeah, it's kind of transcended a little bit, especially in this post-social space. It's kind of transcended to being sort of something that we've just all got, and the brand of that is still really powerful. But what they really did that really blew it wide open was they weaponized empathy. So they understood that user experience like no other. And what Jobs was such a genius at was designing everything around that empathy for the user. And there's a lot of parallels. I mean, there's no coincidence that that's, as a concept, has influenced a lot of great brands and social campaigns these days. A really good example of that sort of stuff is like what Airbnb have done, right? So Airbnb play a bigger game from a brand perspective. They're not hotel rooms or room rentals. They're an immersion in a culture. And that's a big game. I mean, that's goosebumps as a thing to sell people. You know what I mean, in terms of the experience you have when you're traveling, and Airbnb being the custodian of that, as a brand, they're sort of doing that thing that Apple have in terms of elevating your status through your experience of interacting with the brand. Yeah.
I think there's a couple of important things that you've shared or to touch on, and one is this around empathy, and I was checking out some of the sessions from the Funnel Hackers live a couple of weeks ago, and one of the copywriters talked about it's like your copy has to make people feel good. Like, in order for people to click through on your clickbait or whatever it is you're offering, it's got to make them feel good. It's got to relieve them of some form of pressure or tension or stress that they're totally carrying. And I think that this is so true, because we're living in the 21st century where we've never had as much noise or distraction or busyness or perceived stress in the environment as what we've got today. Like, you look at the rising rate of depression, anxiety, and all these other illnesses, it's evident that there's something's going on. And, people are crying out to find relief, crying out to feel good, to feel joy, to feel happy. And fortunately or not, a lot of them are looking for that externally, which is great if you have a product that can provide that for them and even help them resolve it within themselves. But I think that has been a huge thing that we've seen shifted in the last few years, is around the aspect of providing an experience. And ultimately, as a consumer, we're only ever investing money on things for the perception of what it's going to give us, right? We buy a coffee for the perception of how it makes us feel, a car, like you said, status. The second thing that I think is really crucial that not a lot of people understand is that at the core of us as human beings, our deepest desire, our deepest need is the need to feel like we belong.
Yeah.
And what I see that companies like Apple have done so well is that they've indoctrinated people into a sense of belonging.
Yeah, that's what those guys lining up outside the Apple store are doing.
Yeah.
They're signing up for a membership card to a certain group.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They feel like they belong to a movement, to a calling. Like Russell Brunson's another one. Like, he grew his company from 0 to 100 million in 3 years and created what he calls culture. He's created a mass movement now. The guy rocks up on stage and pitches something, and people just fall over backwards to purchase from him without him really knowing what it is, because he's created such a loyal following, because he's such an authentic person that's driven by pulling people together.
Yeah, well, in my field, and I just see that as brand.
Yeah.
I mean, to simply put it, it's the audience's need and the audience's pains, and the audience's life, and what you bring to them. And the only bridging point is brand, from my perspective. That's really interesting, that idea of belonging. I think it crosses over into, it's the old scratching an itch kind of idea, but it's also a very human thing. And in a strange way, the post-social world has kind of caused us to kind of tap into a lot of that. That's why there's so much personal development stuff out there, is because there's such a need for it.
Yeah.
And they're not really market forces, they're human needs.
Yeah.
Super interesting time, though.
I was going to say, super interesting time, super interesting topic. And I want to circle back, because I've got a couple of questions that I feel will help the audience that are watching or listening to this today. Before we go there, I'd love to kind of take a step back. It is the Comeback Game podcast. And the reason we started this in the beginning is because we wanted a way to access so many more people around the world that we just couldn't possibly work with them all within our programs, the Game Changers. And really it was around busting that myth, this false perception that eventually the problems and challenges will go away, or you know, even the unspoken truths that people have about themselves, that they can't do it, that it's not a fit for them, it doesn't work for them, you know, life's hard for them, whatever the case may be, right? And what we've exposed or found episode by episode is these incredible business owners and entrepreneurs that have overcome huge feats to be where they're at, and not only overcome them, but those challenges and those adversities have actually become the launch pad to the to the experience of living right now. So I want to take a step back and get to know you a little bit more. You shared in the beginning that you had a bit of an alternate upbringing. And I feel that's probably a good rock to turn over to start with. Like, with us, what's classified as an alternate upbringing? Because I'm sure you're probably not alone on that.
No, well, I'd clarify that by saying an alternative education.
Alternative education.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, and the podcast is awesome, and it's a privilege to be able to share this with Comeback Nation.
Comeback Nation, I love that.
But just branded you.
Starting our own movement.
Yeah. But I guess I might jump around a little bit here, but my mum started her own school that me and my sisters went to.
Wow.
So it's a really small community school out in the Dandenong Ranges outside of Melbourne, a couple of hours out east of Melbourne. And I think when they first moved there, it's a very different area these days, but when they first moved there, she was a teacher by trade, and she wasn't happy with the options that were there, and she had a certain educational philosophy. So her and a couple of other parents started this school, and I think the most students it ever got to across all of primary was 20. So it's a really tiny school. It had a association to some existing education philosophies, but it also had its own. And so as you get older, and I've got my own little kids now, and you start to really reflect on how that shaped who you are.
She was a real game changer, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. Yeah, very much so. She was the first, I think she might have been the youngest published female author at the time as well. She was a sort of quite a creative force, and also just to start a school and go, yeah, we could do that. It's that important to me that I need to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting to reflect on that in my old age. And the school itself was on a big property in bush, and a lot of the parents did a lot of the teaching, and it just taught a very deconstructive way of thinking.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was around really learning how to learn and learning how to think, rather than just memorizing things by rote. And when we went into a more the government system in high school,
more traditional
system in high school. Sorry, yeah.
Yep.
It was almost like we were just kind of primed a little bit differently. And I guess in reflecting on that now, I think a lot of my thought framework and the way I sort of handle situations has kind of come from those early years. Yeah. So that's why I mentioned that.
Okay.
Yeah,
so what years did you do? Because it wasn't even homeschooling. Like, your mum actually started freaking school.
Yeah, so it's primary. It was all primary. Yeah, but because I have older sisters, so they started, and I was there when I was really tiny, from as soon as it started. So I was kind of right in that kind of community.
So how'd you find the transition to the traditional schooling system?
It was bigger. Academically, it was very easy because yeah. So academically, because we had been given the kind of tools to think differently around things. We weren't just like, I can't remember that, so I don't know it. We were sort of able to deconstruct it.
Wow.
But yeah, and socially, obviously, it was a bit of a different dynamic because it was so small before that. But yeah, it's interesting to reflect on now. I've got little kids now who go to a certain type of school, and it's sort of, I realise that what I think is just a normal primary education is not normal at all.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is probably one of my most fascinating topics, is around, diving into the human experience and really understanding how our upbringing affects the life that we have for ourselves today. Like, long after we've moved out of home from mum and dad, long after we've moved schools or transitioned several careers or whatever the case may be, and even further that, noticing how our experience shows up in our kids as well at such a young age, you know, like that, proven that we start forming our experience of life based on our parents' patterning and belief systems right from first trimester, fetal child. So from the first trimester in your mother's womb, it makes sense though logically, right? Because you're connected to your mother through this umbilical cord, which is providing you with all the goodness that you need to grow up. So it kind of makes sense that as well as all of the materialistic or the physical stuff being blood and food and everything else, we're probably also taking on board the non-physical stuff too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
The behaviors, the values, structures, mannerisms, the attitudes. Yeah. And so I suppose what I'm curious to know is like how, because you put a really positive spin on what you just shared. And I think it's fascinating that methodology of teaching someone. It's like give a man a fish, you feed him for a night, teach a man to fish, you feed him for life. I love that whole methodology of teaching somebody how to think, as opposed to teaching someone how to complete a test properly based on a book.
Yeah, how to memorize something. Yeah,
right? How to memorize something. Because if you're like me and you start to lose your memory when you get a bit older, like you're completely screwed. But like, what were the challenges that came with that? Because I can imagine it wasn't all roses and rainbows. You know, what were the challenges that actually hit you in life based on this alternate education and upbringing?
Yeah, well, that's another thing you're able to reflect on. The privilege of getting a bit older and having your own kids, you're able to reflect on it with a different perspective. And I think you definitely, I personally definitely. So when I say, you know, I painted a really good picture of it, I don't think everyone had the same experience of it, but I do think back very favorably. But I think I have a tendency, I can tie myself in knots with thoughts. Like I can just get and want to just go deeper and deeper and deeper onto things. Yeah. And the situation doesn't always call for that. You know, so overthinking is a term I'm always suspect of, but I think it's definitely a risk.
And they also call that analysis paralysis.
Yeah. But, you know, and there's that's a really common thing. I think that's definitely a common thing with entrepreneurs especially. But it's also just comes from wanting to find so much, wanting to get more and more, and it could be this and it could be that and it could be, you know, and I think that's probably come from my education. But
part of it can come too from your behavioral style. You know, like typically there's a number of different behavioral profiling tools, from Myers-Briggs to DISC, to the entrepreneur personality type. There's a number of different ones, and you know, if you just look at DISC alone, typically D-type compliance-based personality types do have that some could see it as being overthinking, but they would see it as being normal, and that everyone else doesn't think enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of those things, and there's a little bit of, they're all like, is it Gretchen Rubin, her tendencies? Have you seen that sort of stuff, whether you're a questioner or an obliger and all those sort of things? So they're all the same kind of thing, but they're all just a way of making sense of human stuff. But
trying to make us feel better about how messed up we are as human beings.
I think so.
I'm speaking for myself. For everyone listening out there, I'm totally messed up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're all perfectly fine, but I'm messed up.
The other thing about my how I reflect on my early education was that my dad was a small businessman / now call an entrepreneur. So he started his own bookshop in Melbourne, and he ran it really successfully. But me and my sisters all worked in there from the age of 7 or 8, and we just thought that was normal. So,
wow.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that you think back and you go, oh, that's probably just formed this. I've just probably formed these whole beliefs and attitudes that I just took for granted. And then you realize that everyone has, you know. And when you're working in creative spaces and you're talking to people about helping them with a certain thing, or you're asking them to allow themselves to grow a certain way, you start to really get at the coalface of those limiting beliefs that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
You know, and you start to go, oh, well, I mean, that's kind of your limiting belief, but someone external could see that totally differently. You know?
Yeah. It's it's interesting what you share, and I think something that I'd like to note for the people listening is that it is possible to change our experience of life. And I don't mean like just waking up and saying affirmations, because you could say affirmations to you blue in the face. If you don't embody that at a belief level, nothing will actually change.
Mm.
Things have to exist in a space of congruency within us from our inner game perspective before we start to experience it externally in the outer game. And we could be saying things to ourselves or trying to experience things externally, but if the inner game is not aligned, we will never see a congruent experience of that.
Mm.
And so I want to kind of add that regardless of the experience that we grow up with, or regardless of the upbringing, we do have the ability to make modifications to that experience. We do have the ability to make some changes to that. You know, I remember growing up, I was told it's just how you are, and things like a leopard doesn't change its spots, right? And some of those things, hearing some of those things can be disheartening, because when I believe as we start to grow up and as we start to evolve, we become more conscious of all of who we are, the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly.
Yeah.
And as we start to become more awakened or more conscious, we start to realize things about ourselves that we probably wish that we didn't, or we probably wish that we were not brought to awareness of. Now, there's an aspect of us being able to accept that, but if there's certain things that you do that you know just doesn't create the best experience for yourself or for others around you, I think that we have an obligation to want to shift that or change that, right? As opposed to taking the road of ego, saying, well, it's just how I am. It's just deal with it. It's just how I am, right? If that patterning or that trait or that behavior, that belief is not serving you, nor those around you, there is things that people can do to shift it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully put, man. And I'm a big fan of that framework of just be, do, have, just figuring out, you know, what you want to have, which is a hard question for a lot of people, especially, I mean, you can lose yourself a little bit as a parent as well, because you're so focused on your kids that asking someone what they want can be a hard question at a certain age. And then asking what you need to do to get that, and then who do you need to be to do what you need to do to have what you want to have is, you know, they can be really confronting questions, which is crazy to think about, but they are. I mean, for a lot of people, they are.
It's funny what you share, that a lot of people don't know what they want. I believe a lot of people believe that they know what they want. They're stuck in a space or a perception of reality. They believe that they know what they want. Yet when asked and when questioned to actually go deeper on that, that's where things become a little bit distorted, because a lot of people believe that they want more money or they want more time.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily money or more time they want. It's the experience that they believe or perceive that money or more time will give them. And I was only speaking to someone the other day. Actually, I was doing some training with our coaches, and I was sharing with them that when I used to do a lot of one-on-one coaching in the beginning, I'd find that I get two types of clients. I would get the type of clients that would show up completely open to being coached however I felt I needed to coach them. And I felt, and there was another type of client that would show up and they only wanted to be coached on getting the result that they believed that they wanted, whether it be money or time. Pretty much was the two things, right? Yep. The other people that wanted the money or time and that were open to being coached, you could actually coach them on this being piece that you spoke about. Right? You could coach them on what is it that they actually want to experience out of this perception of materialistic objects. Coach them on being that experience, and sure enough, what shows up, but everything that they wanted and so much more.
Yeah.
The other clients that were resistant to the woo-woo or the experiencing emotion or the change work and all that other sort of stuff, they categorized it as, I was hired to help them and I would want to help them. I needed to help them. And so, you know, pushing a certain way of doing things at them wasn't going to get them results. So we kind of had to go in the back door. And so I'd coach them on getting more time or more money, and they'd get there quite quickly. And then the interesting thing would happen, which I knew that would happen, is that they end up more lost and more frustrated and more overwhelmed and even more emotional than when they started with me after getting these things. Yeah. And the reason being is that they ended up becoming so lost because what they believed or perceived would give them the experience they wanted wouldn't, because they were missing this piece inside of embodiment.
Mm.
And it was at that point, it's like, cool. So now can we play mind game? Now can we actually coach the real core issue here, which is around a deep connection to self, a level of fulfillment, a level of gratitude, a level of joy, a level of love, self-expression, authenticity, all these things that internally are natural traits of someone experiencing a successful life.
Yeah, that's exactly how I've experienced my own sort of journey with this sort of stuff. And, there's a couple of those phrases like everything you want's on the other side of your comfort zone and all those sort of things. And I think I've said this to you before, but, if everything you want is on the other side of your comfort zone, I actually think that's why we want it, because we know we're going to have to grow to get it. I mean, I could just choose that I want to be the world's best synchronized swimmer. Like, it's just an arbitrary thing. I mean, in an existential sense, I mean, it doesn't mean nothing. What we want doesn't mean anything. Like, why do we want it is the more interesting question.
Well, it's about the journey, not the destination. It's funny because we had a recent interview with someone else, and absolute gun, one of the coaches at the Game Changers, gun in marketing. We ended up spending most of the interview talking about fulfillment and a bit of woo. And it's a similar kind of thing, is that, you look at Tony Robbins' framework around the 6 core needs. All right. There's 4 needs of he talks about the physical being, and then 2 needs of like the spiritual being. So the physical being is the need for like growth. The need for certainty. The need for uncertainty is that depending on who we are, we all have a need for predictability and a need for adventure. Then we have a need to feel significant, some aspect of significance in someone's eyes or something's eyes or within our own eyes, and a need for love and connection. And they're kind of the core needs that we need as a human being, right? Or as a human doing. Then you have this spiritual aspect, which is the need for contribution. We have to have this feeling that we're contributing to something or someone outside of ourselves, and a need for growth. And the reality of life is that when we stop growing, we start dying. You look at nature as a perfect example. Like, things in nature, they're either green and growing or they're ripe and rotting. There is not this in-between period. Like, even when you look at a lot of plants that go through a period where on the surface they might be plateaued or they might be paused because of the season, in this underground, their roots are still developing, their roots are still forming, they're building foundations to take off again when the conditions are right. And this is what, like, I love that you brought this up. This is where I kind of see the essence of a lot of what we're talking about here in these podcasts is that, if people actually sought out more challenge, if people looked for more challenge, I mean, like, don't go and throw yourself in front of a bus to see if you can recover from it. Like, that's just stupid, right? But if we actually started to change our relationship with adversity, if we changed our relationship with challenge and see it as an opportunity for us to grow, an opportunity for us to evolve, an opportunity for us to become a better version of ourselves, all right, knowing that we wouldn't be given anything we haven't got the ability to handle. Like, that's just the way that life shows up for us.
Yeah.
Yet what so often happens is we complain, we get stuck into this place of effect of the environment, of the situations around. If only it was like this, if only I had that, if only I was another 6 feet tall, if only I had washboard abs, right? Like all these things that we have the ability to attract or to achieve or to gain if we truly want to, yet they are on the other side of a sense of uncertainty or of challenge or adversity.
Every single one of them. Yeah.
Every single one. Like, look back at the biggest challenge you've ever had in your life, the biggest adversity. And for most people, this will be true. Those that it's not true for, it's not true for yet. It will be. At some stage. Look at the biggest challenge, and you will note that some of the biggest challenges in your life have actually been the biggest gifts and the biggest learnings.
Oh, absolutely. And it's easy to say. It's kind of, it's easy to say, but when you actually personalize it like that, everyone has those experiences, some on massive scales, but it's all relevant to your own context. Seth Godin's a big hero of mine, and he talks about the lizard brain or the critter brain or whatever, the primitive brain, whatever term you want to use it for it. And he talks about navigating by that. So when you're afraid of something or something is sort of setting off fear, it's a way of knowing that that's where you're meant to go. And that's what you're meant to challenge yourself to. And navigating by fear is such a beautiful concept. I mean, he's a genius, that guy. And not that you will always get to choose that fear. So sometimes it's about um, you can take some solace in, no matter what you're going through, it's going to be hard, that you need to back yourself to be able to get through it. The hardest time I've ever been through in my life, I lost both my parents within a couple of years. And like all these things, because everyone happens to everyone, they have these kind of frameworks. They say it takes like 3 years for the grieving process. And so I lost my mum really suddenly. And then 3 years later, I lost my dad. So I sort of had this kind of relay of grief. And in those 6 years, both my kids were born as well. So my head was just explode, like it's on another planet. I can't remember a lot of it. But now I look back when I'm in challenging situations, or when I'm trying to really achieve something on a grand scale, that's fuel for me. It's all just part of my experience, and it powers my connection. It powers I try to help it power my relationship with my own kids, and how they can kind of, I guess, prepare for the challenges of life, because something as catastrophic as that, and it's not, it's, the crazy thing is that it's what everyone's going to go through. But at the time when people said that some way there'll be a positive thing that comes out of this, I couldn't understand what they meant.
You're like, piss off. What do you mean?
You don't understand.
You understand, yeah.
Yeah. But the kind of beautiful thing from in a human sense is that we all do kind of understand. Like we do kind of know somewhere that
we're all dealing with some aspect of pain or grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Every last one of us. Like
the content might be different, like your pain of losing your parents, huge, right? Huge. Yet someone could have the same pain around, banging up a car that they've saved up their whole life to buy. Like the reality is that the pain hits us differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pain hits us differently. And like we talked about before, it's like, well, what are you going to do with it? Who are you going to become out of that experience?
Yeah.
Like
what's going to serve you as well?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, what were the learnings in that for you? Or like, what did you get out of that? Because I was going to say to you earlier, I was like, dude, like you seem super positive, and with your head screwed on, and like, has it always been like that?
No, I don't think so. I think people that I would have known 20 years ago might not recognize me, but I guess the short answer to what I can take from that sort of experience is it's kind of everything. Like it's not like I learned these 3 things. It's just everything. It's just how it just causes you to reframe your perspective on yourself and everything, really. And it happens straight away. And that's the kind of gift that grief gives you. Like it brings you closer with the people that share that grief with you as well. And it allows you to kind of just ask bigger questions of yourself, and you don't care about some other things quite as much as you did before that. And in that sort of stoicism sense, it makes you really appreciate things because it's taken a lot of stuff away from you.
I see it beautifully put, Dan. I see it as like it creates contrast. Like if us as human beings were meant to just experience one emotion all the time, we would just have that. It's like if we're only supposed to smell things, we wouldn't probably have a mouth to taste things or fingers to touch things. Like I believe that every part of our human experience has been given to us as a gift.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to unlock that gift within inside of us. And the reality is because we were created so perfectly with free will, with the ability to choose, we have been given like a smorgasbord of emotions, and we can choose to wear on and to express and to play whatever emotion shall we choose. It's just unfortunate that some of us have built a fairly good relationship with some pretty toxic emotions, or some emotions that are maybe not serving us the best when there are so many other choices on the menu.
Yeah, and to circle back to that professionally, I mean, I'm someone, I know what you guys do so well is we sort of, Comeback Nation all understands this, but is treading that line of the business and the personal. But really what you do in a professional sense is just so dependent on how you grow in a personal sense. So those experiences that are human and personal, in my creative industry, they get expressed literally, but they also get expressed just in businesses that I deal with. And I see that people have gone through certain personal things and it's coming out through their business as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that human experience, separating that into, in a capitalist structure or any kind of commercial framework, it's all one thing to me. It's all how you want to show up to your work is how you show up the rest of the time.
Yeah. 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 That saying that I often say that, a business will never outgrow its founder, and that we never have business problems. We only ever have personal problems that are expressed through our business. And like, I want to put a call out to the comeback nation. And, I want to say that if you're someone out there right now, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, and, you're kind of having a hard time, you're finding that you're on a hamster wheel, you got continuous thoughts, you're not growing fast enough, or even that you kind of feel like you're doing it alone. I want to let you know that you're not alone, that we have an incredible community of game changers that are growing, that are scaling, that are, attracting dozens of leads, growing greater profits, and also setting the business up to work without them. And I'd like to invite you to jump on a call with one of our scaling specialists, free call, just to have a chat, because it's either going to be a fit or not a fit. And the beautiful thing is that even if it's not a fit, you're going to get a lot out of that call, and you're going to get a plan, and you're going to feel like someone understands where you're at, and you've got some direction moving forwards. And I'd like to offer that to you guys that are watching or listening to this today, because there is somebody else out there that's going through what you're going through right now. And there is a way forward. There is a way to change the trajectory of your current life to be more in line with how you'd like it to be. Yeah.
Yeah, well
Dan,
said,
dude, any final comments? Like, the time is flown.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Look, I mean...
Long episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, it's been interesting for people. Look, my thing with where I'm at professionally is really, I'm kind of pretty driven to, for people to feel inspired about what they do each day.
Yeah.
I've had jobs where I'm just in a cubicle and it's just crushed me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the purpose is, and you start to lose track of time, and that's something you just learn about yourself, and so you set up the environment to suit you, which, I'm so grateful for. I live a pretty idyllic life these days. I live up in the mountains. I've got two beautiful little kids. I work with my partner. My days are just full of creative inspiration. And when I go into work with businesses, I kind of just want to give them that, like try and give them something through the creative work and through the brand work to find meaning and purpose, to feel proud about, when you start to interact with people that you can share your skills with. That's something that I just think can't be underestimated these days, and people not to feel like they need to hide anything. They just stand up and show up with a purpose, and do that in creative and fun ways, and have fun with it and allow yourself to grow. Yeah.
Mate, I absolutely love that. Dan, mate, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show and share a lot of knowledge, Bobs. The time has flown. To the Comeback Nation, officially, # Comeback Nation. If you guys have got any questions or comments for Dan, please feel free to comment below. Also, we would love your help getting this podcast, getting our message out to more and more entrepreneurs and business owners. And the easiest way to do that is to tag in your friends that you think would benefit or would get some out of the episode, and also share it around. And as shared before, like, if you're someone who's wanting to, you're ready to change the game, you're ready to take it up to the next level. Maybe you've worked with a coach in the past and it worked. Maybe it didn't work. Some of our best clients have been burnt by coaches before. You reach out, book a call, let's have a chat and work out who is it you need to be as a business owner to have the life that you want to have, and what is it you need to do within your business to ensure that those two can come together now and you can start living your best life. Yeah. Dan Peterson, Northwood Green, mate, absolute pleasure. How can the people of this station find you?
Yeah, so check out northwoodgreen.com. That's our main agency site. And if you're in the financial services, we specialise in a lot of that. So that's at highperformancebrand.com.au. And just a little thing on the podcast, there's some awesome previous episodes as well as this one. But Paul Dunn's is amazing, and Alex Charfin's is amazing. So I'd love to hear what other people think. I mean, if this is on Facebook, comment with some of your other previous episodes, and we can share some of the highlights, because there's some great stuff there.
Yeah. What's your favorite episode? What is your favorite episode?
The last one that Alex, or last one as we're recording it, Alex Charfin's was pretty amazing. I love his work, and I'm a big B1G1 fan as well. So
Paul Dunn.
Yeah, Paul Dunn's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Two good buddies of mine, Alex Charfin. If you're watching this one, mate, love you, bro. Keep doing your do. And Paul, mate, you're on a huge mission to change the world as we know it, and you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Yeah, awesome. All right, Dan, thanks so much for your time, mate. Thanks to everyone who's listened to this to the end. We'll be back soon next week for another episode of the Comeback Game podcast, Inspired and Unstoppable. Thanks, Dan.